tell you something, brother. When I'm working on my 24-inch pythons, dude, I'm listening to Let's Find Out with Diego. Train, say your prayers, and listen to Let's Find Out with Diego. Ooh, what you gonna do, brother, when Let's Find Out with Diego runs wild on you?
Are you curious about the unknown, the unexplainable? Do you find yourself intrigued by the mysterious and paranormal side of our world? Join us on an adventure into the world of inexplicable discoveries and investigations that may someday give us the final answer as to what may be behind the veil of reality. The borders of space and time have opened once again, and transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia, it's time once again for Let's Find Out with Diego. The universe is waiting for you.
The borders of space and time have opened once again, and transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia. It's another episode of Let's Find Out with Diego. Thank you for taking this journey with me. On this episode of Let's Find Out, UFOloggy, the intriguing study of unidentified flying objects and unidentified aerial phenomena, has captivated humanity's curiosity for decades. Are these objects all products of the same extraterrestrial manufacturing plant light years away from Earth? Will we ever uncover the hidden truths behind these celestial enigmas? Tonight's conversation promises to delve into the lesser-known tales and accounts surrounding these elusive crafts, providing a mix of well-known and unheard stories in the author's groundbreaking book, The Shape of Things to Come from Elsewhere. Prepare for a riveting exploration into the uncharted realms of UFOloggy as the veil of mystery is lifted. All this plus more. Please welcome to Let's Find Out a new friend to the show, author and UFO witness, Chris Evers. Chris, my friend, welcome to Let's Find Out. It's a real pleasure having you on our show, my friend.
Thank you very, very much for the invitation. And that's me. I'm sat here in my front living room in the United Kingdom, speaking to you through the power of the internet. Isn't that great?
It's amazing that all this technology we have to be able to communicate and share all these accounts and stories that you have presented in your book. And we're going to dive right into it, my friend, because I was looking at your bio. It's an amazing bio, and truthfully, I was kind of battling in my mind, where would I begin? You and I are kind of in the same boat, my friend, because we're seeking answers to life's mysteries. So these type of mysteries, especially in the UFO, UAPs arena, if you don't mind, let's go back to the year of 1974. It's actually one of my favorite years, the year of the Tiger, where your journey began. Now, at that time, you only had a slight interest in the subject of UFOs and also the paranormal. So what threw you into this rabbit hole where most of us live now, my friend?
Well, in all honesty, I didn't really have that deep an interest in the subject. I was a 14-year-old boy, you know. I was beginning to become aware of girls, as we all do at that age, and or most of us do at that age, should I say. And the subject of the paranormal and UFOs weren't something that I had that I really was seeking information on. Now, I used to go and stay at my uncle's home. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, during the early 1970s. And he had a stack of books in the corner, which were basically books about ghost stories and UFOs. And I started, you know, if I go and stay at his home, because I didn't want to go to sleep at like 9 o'clock in the evening, you know, I'd stay awake reading a couple of books and fall to sleep with the lights on, you know, because some of the ghost stories did that to me when I was 14 years old. So that is kind of where I had a slight interest in the subject. What actually awakened my interest was my own experience in the February of 1974. A group of friends were out playing one evening. It was already dark here in Kingston upon Hull by 3:30, 4 o'clock in the evening. And this particular evening we were playing on a building site, Back in those days, they didn't have fences around them in the UK. There was no laws that said they had to do that. That came many, many years later. This particular evening, there was a group of us, about 7 or 8 lads. We decided to go out and play war before we had to go back in to get ready for bed and school the next day and so on, which was normally around about 6:30, 7 p.m. in the evening we went back in. So I do know the sighting was round about 4:30 p.m.-ish. I'm hiding myself away. We'd split into 2 equal teams or thereabouts, and I'm hiding myself away on top of a mud hill, which had been put there by the builders on this building site. I was going to jump up and shoot the opposing team, with my stick, because obviously we didn't use rail guns. We don't have rail guns in the UK. There's no way a 14-year-old can get his hand on a rifle or anything like that. Thank God. Anyway, I was hiding away on top of this hill of mud, and I noticed a flash of light round about 12-ish miles away, where at the time they'd started building the Humber Bridge. Which was it did become for a point in the after it was completed, one of the longest single span suspension bridges in the world. Anyway, this flash of light, I saw it, thought, oh, that's interesting. What's going on there? Just quick flash, gone, forgotten about, and couldn't do anything about it. Couldn't say anything about it. I didn't want to give my hiding place away, and then, just literally seconds later, there was another flash of light. What's going on? What is this? But this flash of light was a little bit nearer to my position. Not massively nearer, but it kind of jumped across the sky. That pricked up my attention a little bit more. And then there was a third flash of light, but not as it was moving towards me. This went from position 1, the first flash, position 3, the second flash, then back to what I call position 2. And then it flashed again in position 4. So it was kind of like leapfrogging across itself, across the early evening sky. And that kind of intrigued me. Anyway, after a few minutes, this flash of light, it got above where I was actually positioned, where I was hiding away on this mud hill. What I will point out at this point is that it was a perfectly clear evening sky. We could see all the star field, we could see all the stars local to us, and there was not a cloud in the sky. Anyway, this thing flashed away, and it flashed away again above my head, and this time, it had been about 5 or 6 times this has happened by now, I jumped up and I shouted to my friends, "Look guys, up in the sky, there's a UFO." Now, the term UFO didn't actually mean a lot to me. I called it a UFO because back then we had TV programs like Thunderbirds and the TV show UFO, which was about Shadow, secret Allied command against UFO invasions, which was all done by Jerry Anderson of Thunderbirds fame and Joe Nancy fame. So that is why I called it a UFO, because it looked like one of these things flashing up in the sky. But as I say, it was only a pinprick. It must have been quite high up in the evening sky. But as I shouted that, remember this was directly over my position, it blinked out, and it didn't flash again or carry on in the direction that it was heading. It was originally heading from the southwest of my position to the northeast of my position. So looking at it logically, it should have carried on in that route that it appeared to be flying. But I kept looking at the sky, I kept scanning at the sky, and I could see nothing. It flashed out and was gone. And that was it. And it was that intrigued me enough to make me go out and go to the local lending library and read books by Donald Kehoe and other authors of the UFO subject, mostly from America, but there were 1 or 2 from Britain as well. Flying saucers are real, flying saucers have landed, and all that kind of stuff, and I kept on reading these to try and find an answer to my personal sighting. And I will say it's literally 50 years now, this year, since that sighting, and I've still not discovered the answer to that. And that was my first sighting that brought me into the subject.
That's very interesting because during that time in the 70s, I think, at least I can only speak in the United States, I only know what goes on around here, that the subject of UFOs was actually starting to blow up and be a little more, I would say, kind of mainstream, but not like quite as today. So during that time that you witnessed these lights, then you went to the library, and I would think you did more research. Back in that day, we had microfiche. If you wanted to look at old articles, you had to go through the
Yeah,
library and look at these
yeah.
things. Word travel very slow, but during that time period, were there any news reports, whether in television or the newspapers, about that event?
No, none whatsoever. I mean, Hull, where I live, it's we're only a small city. We are a city. We have an approximate population of about 260,000 people, and it hasn't really grown since that area. We're not a big conurbation, for example, like Birmingham in the UK or Manchester in the UK or even London. We're literally a speck, when it comes down to the size of London. So Hull itself, as we call it, Kingston upon Hull, didn't really have any news organisations other than the local paper, the newspaper, which was called the Hull Daily Mail. That has carried UFO reports over the years, but of course, these were back in the days when we've seen little green men. We didn't have the reports that are taken a little bit more serious nowadays. Since, of course, we had the December 2017, 17th of December article in the New York Times. I'll give you an example that quite recently, going back about, I think it was about 6 months or so before we had the initial first lockdown from COVID. Myself and a friend were being interviewed on the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, who have a local studio here now in the whole area. And I went in, got sat down, got welcome to the show and all this kind of stuff. And then I got the first question thrown at me from this lady presenter on the BBC. Tell me, have you ever been probed? So I thought, okay, right, I'm not having this. I'm not having this kind of interview. I'm not, the subject is a bit more serious than that as far as I'm concerned. So I pointed out to her that the New York Times, which is the biggest, that's the biggest circulation of a publication of its type in the world, as far as I was aware at that time, takes the subject a little bit more seriously. And this article, which was a front page article, pointed out that the Pentagon, they are interested in the subject. They cannot explain it away. So the interview completely changed. It got a little bit more serious, and she started asking what I would call proper questions, not the taking the mickey, taking the, I'll say urine for want of a better word, out of the subject. And the interview completely changed. Now, I was on that for about an hour with my friend. And but as soon as I left, I had my mobile telephone with me, my cell phone, and I put the radio on the mobile phone. And of course, I'd left the subject. It just went back to taking the, oh yeah, I wonder if he's been probed kind of attitude again. But we do know globally that the subject is now being taken far more serious than it used to be.
And that it is, my friend. And interesting, you bring up the subject of the probe, because it seems to be almost, people say, as a joke, because they want to try to make you seem foolish to what it is, your experiences, everybody else's experiences. But I've learned from other people's, the interviews that I've had on and one-on-ones, to where that's something that doesn't really happen as often as people think it does, because they do other things other than that kind of types of experiments, sort of say.
Mm-hmm.
But since 1974, and I know you're talking about also more current time in the interviews that you've had, I'm going to try to ask this question carefully because I don't want to get you or myself in trouble. During the times you were being interviewed by these news services, was there just you and the interviewer and some cameramen? Was there anybody in there that seemed, maybe they're acting differently, that perhaps maybe they were not from the news services?
Yeah, so no, there was no let's call them Men in Black for the sake of an argument. No, there was no people that appeared to be there that were different or strange. There were regular people, in the studio when I was interviewed the last time at the BBC. There was the lady presenter, my friend. He's known as Mike Couple. He's been interested in the subject quite a number of years. There was me and him there, and there were two or three. Well, I don't know. They were kind of like in with the show anyway. So, yep, just normal humans, nobody strange with purple eyes or anything like that, or, grey, shallow complexions and all the rest of it.
Great, because you definitely answered the question in my mind. I'm thinking, was there somebody there that perhaps looked kind of funny? So then after that interview aired or printed, what was the feedback on that interview? Did you get any more emails or phone calls of other people telling you their stories, or what happened?
No, well, I'd actually gone in to promote the conference that we were about to run that particular year. And, I believe I sold a few more tickets because of it, but I wasn't allowed to give out my contact details or my email address or anything like that. So I didn't get any actual new reports. But I'm no longer an actual investigator. I'm a reporter of the global events, which I continue to do now with Outer Limits magazine, which, more details on that can be found online. My days of being an investigator actually finished, to be totally honest, round about the year 2000. I'd done that for a number of years. I worked for a gentleman by the name of Tony Dodd. Or if you have listeners in Great Britain, they will remember the name. And I'd done a few investigations on his behalf. His organisation was Quest International, and I'd made friends with a lot of the investigators around the UK at the time. A lot of these contacts I still have today, but I don't actually go out and investigate modern-day UFO sightings. I'm far too busy doing the 6 times a year magazine that I put together, PDF-based magazine.
And that's one of the things I wanted to talk about here in a little bit. But let's go back a little bit, because you just said something that you're no longer actively investigating, but you're still a reporter. Still a very important role, because you're able to answer this question. You and I were very close to the same age, and we've seen the subject of UFOs gain popularity, fall flat, gain popularity like a Richter scale. Mm-hmm. And I think now we're in a whole different level, a whole different dimension now of information that's come to us, from soft disclosure to possible real deal disclosure. Mm-hmm. In your opinion, but do you find now that are we having more sightings of UFOs now that we had, I say, back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s?
Well, this appears to go up and down on a regular basis anyway. I believe not last year, I think 2022. I'll give you one area of the UK as an example. Northern Ireland is well known globally, but I think it had a greater number of actual sightings reported in 2022 than it had done for a number of years. And I think on average, this globally, even today, there's at least 6 daily reports of UFOs which have been witnessed. So, I'm not great at maths, so I'd leave you or your listeners to work out 6 times, 365 days a year. It's quite a few. I can tell you, though, that NUFORC, which is the National UFO Reporting Centre, I actually quote these in my book, the shape of things to come from elsewhere. Up to November 2022, that had somewhere, since their creation, that had somewhere in the number of 47,000 separate sightings reported, and that is just one organisation in the United States. All countries have got their own UFO investigation organisations, and of course America has several.
Yes, interesting. In the United States, though, not only with UFOs, but we're getting more and more increased reports and eyewitness accounts of a rise of Bigfoot and dogmen sightings. I was also surprised that something like that also is happening in the UK, but does this go hand in hand?
Well, in the UK, there is an area not that far from where I'm actually sat right now. If you are any of your listeners have ever listened to a gentleman by the name of Paul Sinclair, who I've actually known since the mid 1990s, he investigates reports of dogmen sightings, and there are a few suggestions that there may be some kind of British Bigfoot. Now, how these relate to UFO sightings, I don't know, but they do go hand in hand, and they have done for many, many years. In Britain, we have regular reports, which I cover regularly as well in the magazine, of big cat sightings. Now, remember, Britain does not have an indigenous big cat species living here, but they have been witnessed round and round, the United Kingdom, from Cornwall, which of course is in the far southwest, right up to Northumberland and into Scotland. Northumberland is, if you look at the British map, it's like at the top on the right hand side, just before you enter Scotland. So they've been seen in Wales, they've been seen in Scotland. My understanding is as well is that they've been seen in Ireland, Southern Ireland, or Northern Ireland as well. So these strange creatures, why are they here? Where have they come from? Brilliant question.
In my opinion, sometimes I think it's connected, because I think that when one area is busy, the other ones follow. I don't know. It's kind of hard for me to explain it. Sometimes the work is in my mind, but I said, well, there's smoke, there's fire, as they say over here. And now, going back to your book, The Shape of Things to Come from Elsewhere, and you also editing magazine, PDF magazine, you say online, Outer Limits magazine. I don't know how you find time to write a book, do reporting, and then do the Outer Limits magazine. Going to your book, there's accounts of well-known sightings, but also lesser-known sightings. Now, without giving spoilers, because I want the listeners of Let's Find Out to go ahead and purchase this book and learn all about what it is that you're reporting. What is one of the lesser-known sightings in your country, and where did it happen?
Okay, well, one of the lesser-known sightings, we've had various sightings in all parts of the UK. We have one, for example, again, not far from where I'm sat right now. We have a village here called Warne. It's spelled Wawnne. And back in 1977, not long after the Broadhaven school sighting, which was quite famous, and you may have heard of that over there in America. But this Warne school village, the school children had gone out to play in the afternoon, and they'd witnessed a silver-shaped craft flying across from their left in the school playground to the right. And of course, the teacher didn't take it seriously, but they asked the children to draw the images of what they've witnessed. And the vast majority of these school children drew, should I say, the same, practically the same craft. A standard type silver, let's call it typical flying saucer type shape craft. So they all drew that. So that is one of the lesser known ones. But of course, in the United Kingdom, and I'm not an expert on Rendlesham at all, I think Rendlesham is one of those, it's a little bit like Roswell. Once you get into it, you can't get out, And, we've had famous sightings like Rendlesham. We've had Berwyn Mountain sightings where something landed or crashed, it is said, into the mountains in Wales. In North Wales, not Berwyn. Yeah, the Berwyn Mountains incident, yeah. So, yeah, we've had things like that happen. But then again, we'll look at Australia. We've got school sightings over in Australia. And I'm sure there's a famous school sighting in Zimbabwe, where several school children all said they witnessed something. And, these kind of sightings go on globally, and they go on every single day of the year. Now, where I found the time to report on all these is, I occasionally do get up earlier than other days and write things down and get on with things. And that is how I basically put the mag together.
And with these reports and these eyewitness accounts that you hear about, so if I were a reporter and a writer like yourself, my friend, what's the checklist that you have in order to make sure the story is legit or there is something to this?
I tend to look at things a bit logically if I can, and what I do is I try and answer questions that I would ask the individual, and then if it passes those questions, I will include it in the magazine, or I'll mention it in my book, or my next book, which I'm currently working on at the moment. So I try and find the obvious answers, and if there are, it doesn't pass those specific questions that I ask, then I won't include it, because I only want to provide correct and logical information to people. It's one of the taglines that I have for Outer Limits magazine is "Be informed." So I try to inform people of things that are going on that are unusual, because let's be honest, we live on a very, very strange planet.
We do, and I don't think this is just in my opinion, and I could be wrong, but I think I'm right, my friend, on this, to where I think the average person doesn't understand quite how old this planet is and quite how old humanity is, in a way to where we kind of forget our history as generations to go. I don't know if it's something that's done on purpose, or is it because we've lost interest in anything other greater than our own selves.
Yeah.
So with that being said, and I can only speak for the United States, but in the UK, how is the mood? How is the belief system in the UK when it comes to the subject of UFOs or paranormal or anything related like that?
I wouldn't say that we go out and we talk about this every single day to friends and relatives and so on. We're probably very much like America. We will talk about it if people ask us, but we don't necessarily bring up the conversation on that subject individually. Because let's be honest, the ridicule factor, which started way, way back in 1947 after Roswell, it has taken its toll. Yeah, and as I say, it comes back down really to what I was saying about the BBC interview. They try to belittle the subject to keep it down. But I think more and more people, they're prone to believe that we cannot, in any way, shape, or form, be the only intelligent species anywhere. Enrico Fermi, going back to the 1950s, speculated that there were billions and billions of, I think the word was, I always get these two mixed up, galaxy and universe. But, it estimated there were billions and billions of these, and that in each of these galaxies there would be thousands and thousands and thousands. I could go on forever and fill the rest of the show with that. There were thousands of different suns in those systems. Now, if each one of those suns had a planet around it, we would be looking at somewhere in the hundreds of thousands of planets that had intellectual life on them. Now, how smart they are and how long they survive before, like we do, we come close occasionally to blowing up the planet up because of the stupidity of nuclear weapons, then there must be millions and millions of other intelligent species out there. Now, the next question is, are they visiting the planet? And if they are visiting the planet, how are they visiting the planet? What propulsion system do they have? How do they travel through space? Well, I'm afraid to say it may be something to do with the books that I read back in the 1970s. I'm still a little bit nuts and bolts on the subject. I'd like to think they're travelling here in some kind of craft, that they use a progressive propulsion system that brings them to the planet. Let's call it a warp drive for the sake of arguing. So they're using something like that to get here. And some people speculate they come from a different dimension. They could be right. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I'm just an everyday Joe who goes, does his 9 to 5 and gets on with my everyday life.
You and I both, and I think that, what you were speaking of earlier, I think in roundabout way, it was called the Drake equation, where
Yeah.
it's a mathematical formula to however many stars and exoplanets or planets here. Maybe
Well,
one in. I'll use this number. Yeah,
sorry, Diego, but before the Drake equation, Enrico Fermi came out with that suggestion. I think it was in about 1950, 51, 52. It was basically asking where they all are. And that's how we worked it all out, you know. And the Drake equation, forgive me if I'm incorrect, and I apologize now if I am, I'm sure that came out in the 60s.
that's possible because sometimes when somebody comes up with a theory of some sort, and I think it's usually piggybacks from somebody else's theory,
Yeah.
which is, I mean, that's totally normal in science or anything like that to enhance other people's work. So I'll definitely I can see what that would be the case. And then if we're talking back 40s and 50s, it might have even been early 60s. The name George Adamski, does that ring a bell to you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. See, I will point out that his book with Desmond Leslie, which actually brought him into the subject, George Adamski was only made a co-author because Desmond Leslie wanted to use the images that he'd said he'd taken at the Palomar in California. So the book was already wrote, as far as I'm aware, when Adamski was added as co-author.
I love the whole subject of George Adamski because there's people who fall into two categories. They either don't like anything he did or they love what he did. I can't say which I am in here, which side I'm in or not. I think I'm mostly of I like the work that he did, but that's a whole different episode in itself. The reason I bring up George Adamski is this because I found out about him. I read a book, and I want to say it was by Timothy Good, and it was called Alien Base on the Moon or Alien Base, some sorts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in that book there was a lot of information about George Adamski and the experiences he had, I guess, with the Venusians, or was it Valiant Thor?
Yeah.
It could be. Forgive me if my facts are a little bit messed up on that. So many diverse opinions about him. What did you find interesting about George Adamski?
Well, what I actually found interesting about him was that in the books that I'd read, I read, of course, I'm going back to the 1970s now, when I was a child back in the 1970s. You know, it seemed fascinating that this individual could meet people who were very much similar to us or Nordic in style, and that it could meet people from other planets. Now, a lot of these planets were said to be in our own solar system. But now, of course, we know that suggestion that they come from Venus or come from Mars was actually incorrect, because we know these planets cannot sustain life as we know it, or life that is quite probably intelligent. We've seen things recently put out on the internet regarding things that they've found on Mars. We see people putting out images left, right, and centre, claiming, "Oh, this rock is this shape," or this, "Oh, you can see this off in the distance. It's a doorway." But when you look a bit closer, some of the claims are not quite what they want them to be. So it was great. They did a great job of getting the subject out there. George Adamski did, and I know he was quite important. He travelled and he met the Pope at the time, and they did a great job of getting the subject out there to the rest of the population, globally in some cases, but I think some of the claims that they made have now proven to be slightly incorrect. But the next question would be, if these claims that they've made are what they believe was correct, like George Adamski believed, the claims that he made were correct, was he being told these things by the people, or the aliens, or whatever you want to call them, that he'd met up with? Was he being misled by these people? Now, of course, when we look at George Adamski, we see pictures that some people claim are chicken coop feeding platforms, So it's I don't know. I think a lot of it we have to take with a pinch of salt. We have to investigate, and we got to rule out that really, which doesn't seem to be correct.
No, perfectly said. is with anything, any kind of information, you really have to dissect. And I said, look at it from a logical perspective. To does this make sense? And so if it does, let's keep exploring what you just said. And in a way, was he being fed misinformation by these beings? It could be a possibility because perhaps at that time we weren't ready for that kind of information.
Well, that's quite a possibility. Yeah, I mean, it's like going back to the USAF in at Roswell. They couldn't answer or give a straight answer to the question because they did not have the information. They could not say where these things had come from, and I'm afraid the weather balloon explanation for Roswell just doesn't ring right for me. Even Jesse Marcel. Let me put that right. I have some information that he has given, which is on film, which was filmed at the time and used in a TV show, where he says, that the footage that he was ordered by General Ramey to not say anything and just sit there and have his photograph taken. He said, did Marcel, that the reporters were asking him questions, but he was ordered not to answer anything. And they didn't know what the truth was. They didn't see, in those photographs, the real debris. And that's all I'll say on that one.
All right, and I respect what you say because I was thinking about some follow-up questions, but we'll save that for a time that's proper and perhaps it was safe for you to divulge that information. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, you're most welcome, my friend. That's thank you for asking that question.
And no problem, man. It wouldn't be me if I didn't ask the questions, but moving forward, because we talked about the Outer Limits magazine. Now, this is how many times a year is that published,
Yeah.
the magazine?
Okay. Okay. Yeah, it comes out every 2 months, 6 times a year. We start in the February of the year and go into April and so on. And it's available online. You can subscribe. You can actually buy individual issues. Once you let me know what issue you want, or if it's just the one issue, I'll then invoice people. As soon as that invoice is paid and goes through my Stripe account, then obviously I'll send that particular issue out to people. But you can have a subscribe for a year, which is £11.50 for the year, and that includes the Stripe fee. That's approximately, forgive me if I'm incorrect, round about $14 for the 6 issues a year. Then after that, you get a 2-year subscription, which is £19.50. I'll let you work that one out. I reckon that's around about $22, $23, or $24. And then, of course, we do a 3-year subscription for 18 issues. And that is £37.50 or thereabouts approximately. So again, roughly about $45, I reckon, for the 3-year subscription. But all the information regarding Outer Limits magazine is on our internet site, our website, which is www.olm-mag.co.uk, and all the information is on there about our conferences, how to get a copy of my book, how to subscribe, and so on and so forth.
Perfect. And I think it's fairly priced, especially in today's economy. I think you get a lot for what you're paying for. And the reason I bring up Outer Limits magazine is because once somebody subscribes to this magazine, and I know there's a lot of great information in there, for the reader of that magazine, once they open up the magazine, what can they find there? What great articles, and who are you talking about there?
Oh, good heavens! We cover everything paranormal, but my own background is in the UFO interest of the subject, or the old flying saucers, as we used to call them back in the 1970s. Yeah, my particular interest is in that subject. But in the latest issues, we've had big cat stories, we've had ghost stories, we cover sky watches. Everything to do with the unexplained, really. So if people have an interest in ghosts, we occasionally put the odd ghost, and the ghost stories we put in our odd as well. We put the occasional odd ghost story in there as well, because we do know that people have a genuine interest in all things paranormal. But my own particular interest is in the UFO field.
Perfect, because I was on your website. I was like, man, I'll have to get myself a copy of that. We'll talk about that offline. I think I'm going to subscribe immediately after I get off from this interview, which leads me to the next thing where I have actually a question from one of the listeners and supporters of the show.
Hmm.
And they asked me to ask you a question, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure.
Perfect. So this question comes from a good friend of the show and supporter, filmmaker Dustin Gramar. His question is, do you think that these UFOs slash UAPs are from world governments, other dimensions, or do they actually come from other planets?
Well, government, let's take that question first. Why would they be flying experimental craft in populated areas around the globe? If, for example, the SR-71 Blackbird, it wasn't admitted to existing, and we do know that some UFOs, flying saucers, were said to be flying saucers because of the SR-71. But why would they be testing brand new technology around the globe in areas where possible future combatants could exist and where they could capture that experimental craft? Okay, so that I would say no, that they're not from the world government or anything like that. Other dimensions. While there is no positive existence that these places kind of exist, even though some people would say there are, then I would say no, we cannot prove that they are from other dimensions. Now that leaves somewhere out there. Now where that somewhere out there is, for me, I cannot answer that specifically. Again, because I'd simply be guessing, But it seems to me, and personally, my personal wish is that there are some intelligent life forms out there that have decided to take an interest in the planet. Now, reasons for that could be manifold, but I will say I personally do not do the space brother thing, where they're coming to warn us about nuclear weapons or, greenhouse gases, etc., etc. I think if they are coming, they have a specific interest in the planet for a reason which is yet to be disclosed.
And in a way, I do subscribe to that line of thinking. Just in my opinion, had they had something to say that can help us, it would have already been done,
Yeah. If they're coming to take over the planet, as some other people, some believers also suggest, well, why haven't they done it by now? It's exactly the same argument as you've just espoused.
Yes, and it's one of those things that there are theories out there that are actually are running the world governments, but it's mostly the reptilians doing these type of things. So, I mean, it's a whole show in itself. Again, another theory that
Absolutely.
I'm not.
Absolutely.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that theory. I think there is some truth to that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll leave that up to the experts for sure.
Yeah.
So now, jumping into the now. You also present a yearly UFO conference. I think this year's in East Yorkshire. The 2024 events coming up on. We talked about this earlier on September 14th. Who's going to be presenting at that show? Who's going to be there?
Oh, good heavens! Well, we have Paul Askoff, who's a lad from Leeds, which is about 50 miles away from where I live. He's a former British UFO Research Association investigator and gentleman. He'll be doing a presentation. We have Jason Gleaves, who's ex-RAF. He's a well-known illustrator. He's also a well-known investigator. All these people I'm going to mention, by the way, are all authors as well. So they have had several books out there. So far that's Jason Gleaves and Paul Askoff. We also have a local lad. Again, he's about 20 miles from where I live, by the name of Steve Aspin. Now, Steve is well known in America. He's worked with Bud Hopkins, Peter Robbins, and other associates. He's a generational abductee. So he'll be coming to do a presentation. We've got myself. I'll be doing a little introduction to open up the conference. I'm doing a talk on disclosure, and actually why I believe we don't need it. We don't need to wear that from the United States. When you get government bodies over there suggesting, for example, NASA, that they don't have enough information to investigate reports. Now, hold on a minute. There are enough civil organisations out there and enough in American hidden files and documentation for them to look at, going back to at least 1947. I don't believe we need to rely on America or America's Pentagon or whatever coming forward to tell us we're being visited. There is more than enough information. Now, I'm sure I'm going to miss somebody out, but we also have Graham Rendell, who's coming to do a talk. He's another author. He's coming to talk about UFOs and disclosure. Back in the early days, from the time of Winston Churchill, Britain set up a UFO desk, as it became known, back in the 1950s, and it was under his orders that it was established. Of course, Winston Churchill was a great World War II British Prime Minister, and he was quite interested in the subject and kept his own information on a regular basis. So that's those. And coming from America, we have a young man who's quite new to the game by Peter Robbins. Now, I'm sure Peter will laugh at that, but after me calling him a young man. But yeah, Peter's coming to do a presentation for us. And on top of that, we have another gentleman who's quite well known. He's the author of the book Communion, which was made into a film starring Christopher Walken back in 1988-89. It was released by the same title, Communion. So Whitley Strieber is coming to speak for us here in Kingston upon Hull on the 14th of September 2024, around about 8 or 9 weeks away now. And, it's going to be, I think, one of the best conferences that we've actually put on in a number of years. And of course, in the past, we've had people like Colonel Charles Holt, Mary Rodwell, and many, many well-known British speakers.
An amazing event for sure, my friend. And now, for the listeners, let's find out, not only that want to learn more about this event, the book, and the magazine that you publish. And I know you mentioned the website for the magazine. Where can people find out more about what it is that you do?
Well, again, just go to the website. All my details are on there. They can get, if they're interested in purchasing the book, which again, forgive me if I get this calculation incorrect, it's £11.50 British pounds. So I presume it's around about $15 US to actually purchase a copy. And I cover in the book everything from cross-shaped UFOs to diamond-shaped UFOs to, of course, the Damsky type, which, like it or love it or, or hate it, it is part of the folklore of UFOlogy. So I include that. I start with one case which actually goes back to round about the year 200, 300 AD, where Emperor Constantine actually claimed he witnessed a cross-shaped UFO just before he had a famous battle, and he took over. He became Emperor of Rome after he did that. So that gets mentioned in there, and then I come up to the 1950s, a famous sighting in Italy, which was over a football game, where people claimed to have seen spiders from Mars, which of course became David Bowie's backing band back in the 1970s. A little talk about Bowie and his explanations of why he was interested in the subject are in the book as well. And I bring it right up to the modern day, going to the Tic Tac sightings and the gimbal sightings, So there is a lot in there. And even if you're new to the subject, you will find something that'll interest you and hopefully inform you. But even if you've been in the subject, as we have, like 50 plus years or whatever, you're still going to find something in there, which there might be reports that you may have heard of previously but have forgot, or there may be reports you don't know anything about. There'll be something in the book for you.
And that's the thing. If you don't mind coming back on the show a little later this year, and let's pick a handful of these stories that we may or may not heard about. Let's talk about them here, and let's have a great conversation.
Yeah, I'll be more than delighted to come back and speak with you. But I'll just finish, if we're finishing now, and just say, if people are interested in purchasing the book, go to Amazon, and it's all on there. Just search for Chris Evers, The Shape of Things to Come From Elsewhere, and that'll take you to the page.
Thank you, my friend. This has been another excellent episode of Let's Find Out with Diego. Please check us out on all our social media, YouTube, and we're also on Rumble. Like, share, and subscribe. Also, Let's Find Out is now on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. Catch the show on Saturdays at 2 a.m. For more information, please visit KGRADB.com. That's KGRADB.com. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Until next time, my friends.
Let's find out with Diego, the power of Diego Mania.
All content for Let's Find Out is property of co-host Diego and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, co-host Diego, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.